Engineers have created a lot of robots that look and act like humans, but they've had a hard time figuring out how to keep bots from falling over. That might have changed in 2017 for the once clumsy bipedal robots. The interest in bipedal robots has mainly come from companies who want them as part of their workforce, particularly as delivery workers or soldiers. In order to do those jobs, the bots need to be able to move like humans. But engineers have had a hard time creating an algorithm which perfectly mimics human motion, so these bots fall over quite a lot. But the equipment used to build human-like robots is becoming cheaper and more effective. Sensors used by robots to detect their surroundings, for example, used to go for as much as $250,000 in 2010. Now, those same sensors only cost about $8,000. That improved equipment has allowed engineers to recreate human anatomical structures in their robots, which helps them move more easily. One group of Japanese engineers, for instance, created 2 exercising robots with full musculoskeletal systems, including 5-fingered hands, 5-toed feet, multi-jointed spines, and robotic muscles. And while engineers are pushing their robots to perform more complicated human motions, the new tech is helping bots move with ease. In 2015, Boston Dynamics Atlas couldn't take more than a few steps without falling. But by 2016, the robot could maintain its balance as well as open doors. And in 2017, Atlas could even perform a backflip off a platform. But even with all these improvements, don't expect to see humanoids walking alongside humans anytime soon. Some of these robots still need a human operator to help them if something goes wrong.
Bone-chilling cold and snow gripping large swaths of the U.S. National Guard troops put on active duty in Pennsylvania as the state digs out of record-breaking snow. A disaster emergency declared in Erie, Pennsylvania, where more than 5 feet of snow has fallen, and more is expected tonight. CNN meteorologist Allison Chinchard joins us now with the incredible pictures. Allison?
That's right, yeah, and on top of that, now you have to worry about the incredible cold air that's in place. And the concern with that is how much frostbite could set in and quickly. Now, in most of these areas, you're talking 15 to even 20 minutes of being outside if you are uncovered. Take a look. Again, we've got from West Virginia all the way up to Maine, these folks either under a wind chill advisory or a wind chill warning. Now, you have to keep in mind, we've got folks out there enjoying that snow. This gentleman going out in very little clothing to enjoy the snow that was there, diving in. After he did this, I think he thoroughly regretted that decision. You start to notice he jumps back up, and then he will make his way over towards a hot tub. Again, that's also not necessarily a great recommendation because of that contrast, temperature contrast against your skin. But folks are trying to get out there and enjoy the snow that they have. This young lady trying to shake some of the branches, notice all of the snow that falls on top of her. The problem is being outside for very long periods of time as these temperatures get cold is not good for your skin, again, because that frostbite can set in. We have the first round of Arctic air that's already moved through. It retreats a little bit before returning yet again as we go into the weekend. Here's the concern with that. The good news is it may actually help prevent lake effect snow going forward. The first point, we are at about 9% of Lake Erie covered. By Monday, by New Year's Day, we should be at 40% covered. And Pam, believe it or not, this is actually good. The more frozen Lake Erie is, the less likely those folks are to get more snow.
Brutal holiday week weather. You are looking live at the dangerous icy conditions on the roads in Cleveland. It is a pretty rough commute this morning. If you're looking for an excuse not to go to work, I say you found one. And residents are digging their way out of that record-shattering snowfall with more than 60 inches in some areas as that intense deep freeze stretches across the country. ABC's Alex Perez is in upstate New York for us this morning. Good morning to you, Alex.
Hey, good morning, Paula. Some people are waking up to bone-chilling temperatures that feel like 30 below zero. Now, we can't move around too much here because we're standing on ice, but take a look around me here. We are along Lake Erie here, and you can see the crashing waves have essentially turned into a mound of ice, frozen solid. Overnight, millions of Americans from the Midwest to the Northeast getting slammed by a dangerous winter mix of snow, ice, and blistering wind chills.
I have to bear the cold.
It's really cold. I don't know, it might be a little too cold for us.
Treacherous travel for the millions returning home after the holiday weekend. Lake effect snow spreading from Cleveland to upstate New York. In Erie, Pennsylvania, a snow emergency declared with record-breaking snowfall of more than 60.5 inches since Christmas Eve, forcing restrictions on both I-86 and parts of I-90.
A lot of snow, just keeps coming.
The blizzard-like conditions leaving parked cars completely covered.
It's a little ridiculous.
In Missouri, 5 dead and 125 injured in car accidents during the Christmas weekend. The slippery roads forcing cars to slide off the interstate, flipping on their sides, some turning all the way over. In Buffalo, New York, residents digging themselves out.
This is something else. I haven't seen this in a long time.
And here's the not so great news. More Arctic cold, more lake effect snow headed for these areas that have been affected already. It's going to be a tough few days for everyone trying to survive all of this. Paula?
Alex, I got to admit, you look pretty miserable. Stay warm, please.
We saw unforgettable images of Mother Nature's wrath throughout 2017. As a hailstorm struck Colorado, a mother and her 3 children found themselves trapped in their car.
They were all petrified. They were terrified. I mean, I was really terrified too.
Debris, big debris.
Now watch as a barn disintegrates as a monster tornado rips along a country road in Wyoming. The twister also tore the roof off a house.
Let's check on those people.
It's a miracle no one was injured. And there goes a lifetime of memories as a home in New Hampshire is swept away in a monster storm. It wasn't wild weather, but a giant sinkhole that destroyed this home in Florida. The family had just moments to flee.
For people displaced by the Marawi fighting, life in a muddy camp with open drains was already miserable. Then came the floods. Some tents were washed away and all of them were swamped. The Guro family's possessions are still a wet pile and they go to sleep in the damp. Their neighbor, Farhana Ampuan, and her family lost their home and business in the fighting. Now her daily battle is with the water and mud to keep it out.
You have to constantly think about where to put your things. In Marawi, we had money and could eat properly, and I could go to school.
The city bears the scars of the months of conflict between government troops and fighters linked to ISIL. For now, it is quiet, but there's still a threat of renewed hostilities, and martial law in Mindanao has been extended for another year. But on the edge of the city, signs of hope. New permanent homes are being built for displaced people. President Rodrigo Duterte, who's from Mindanao, has promised to find a lasting solution to the conflict. For him, this project is an important step on the road to peace.
We will help. That's why I'm here. Part of my job. We're all workers of government.
It's an ongoing dilemma for Mindanao. The conflict holds up development, the lack of money and jobs then fuels the underlying discontent, and none of this is helped by being battered by storms. From her tent home, Farhana Ampuan can see the new houses being built on the opposite hillside, but doesn't know if she will get close to moving into one.
I hope one day we can make a new start, and living in one of the new houses would help.
For now, the new houses are far outnumbered by the thousands of tents. Rob McBride, Al Jazeera, Marawi City, southern Philippines.
It's a start, but it's not enough. Only a handful of East Ghouta's critically ill are being allowed to leave to hospitals in Damascus, which is less than an hour's drive away. 29 patients, the majority of them women and children. The Syrian government is allowing them to be treated outside the besieged opposition stronghold after the armed group Jaish al-Islam agreed to release some government prisoners. It's not clear if new deals will be reached. It has been 4 years since East Ghouta was besieged by the Syrian army. The siege has tightened in recent months. There are, according to the United Nations, almost 500 urgent medical cases. Sulaiman has brain cancer. She says her condition is only deteriorating. The UN says more than a dozen people have already died while waiting to be evacuated for treatment.
There is no treatment available for me here. I have nothing. No medicine, no money. I'm just waiting for God's mercy.
It's not just a lack of medical supplies, there is a lack of food. The United Nations says the area is experiencing the worst case of child malnutrition since the start of the conflict.
The lack of medical equipment and vaccines have affected children. Also, they are malnourished. This has led to a number of diseases. Unfortunately, the children are facing dire conditions.
There have been 3 reported deaths because of malnutrition in the past 2 months. Sahar, Samer, and Haytham were all not even 2 months old when they died. The UN says more than 1,500 children are at risk, among them 232 who are acutely malnourished.
More than half of the 400,000 people trapped in East Ghouta are believed to be children. The area is not just under siege, it remains a war zone, despite a Russian-guaranteed de-escalation deal that was supposed to have silenced the guns and allowed aid in.
In September, aid reached the area for the first time in months, but it was only enough for 40,000 people. There is suffering in this region, and the fear is that the worst is yet to come. The government is using the siege and starvation tactic as a military strategy, and as the situation worsens, the likelihood of a surrender becomes more real. Zana Khuder, Al Jazeera, Beirut.
Early November, Saudi Arabia has been blockading Yemen, and that's plunged the war-ravaged country into an even deeper humanitarian crisis.
We wear rubbish, we eat rubbish, and we drink from rubbish. And if anyone accuses us of lying, they can come to us and witness everything with their own eyes.
We're here looking for food. We have no work, no workplaces. That is why we work here.
Of ISIL in Syria and Iraq, more tales of horror are emerging of life under the terrorist rule. Kurdish minority families in Iraq, known as Yazidis, suffered capture, death or enslavement. Our correspondent, Murad Gazdiev, has been speaking with some of the families who managed to survive the ordeal. We will show you the full interviews here on Thursday, although here is some of what's to come.
We were captured. We spent 2 months in Iraq, then we were taken to Syria. They made me a slave. We were put to work and held where the troops were. We were given 1 hour a day to rest, then I ran away. They caught me and locked me in a toilet for 3 days without food or water. I tried to escape again and again, but each time I was caught, beaten and severely tortured. They shot my friends. We begged them for mercy on our knees. Then we were hit by an airstrike and I was concussed. My head still hurts. I can't talk for long. I was pregnant, but I was so terrified that I lost my child. My husband and family were captured. I was left alone with my mother. So I took poison. I decided it was better to die. When they caught me, I thought that since my family, my husband, and my house were gone, it would be better to die.
Well, in 2014, up to 10,000 Yazidis were killed or kidnapped by ISIL in a matter of days. Of those, a third were executed. However, the true scale of the tragedy may never be fully known. The testimonies that have emerged suggest many have been tortured, beheaded, or even burnt alive. In many cases, entire families were captured together. Women and girls were often sold as sex slaves, while young boys were forced to become ISIL fighters. Some weren't even old enough for school when they were forced to serve the terrorists.
My daughter was 5 years old when she was captured. 4 years have passed since then, so she is 9. We endured a lot of suffering. My brother escaped and I stayed at his place. Then he died in Sinjar. I was desperate after his death and I went to stay with my other brother. He is poor and has young children, all girls.
At least 4 people have been killed in a bomb blast in the Afghan capital, Kabul. Several others were wounded in the explosion, which hit an office in the Afghan Voice news agency in the west of Kabul. No group has claimed responsibility. The blast is the latest in a series of ones to hit Afghan media groups, and it follows an attack on a private television station in Kabul last month.
Paying bills, talking to friends, listening to music, so much of our daily routine has become digital nowadays. Well, it looks like Israel is now considering yet another major step into the digital revolution by cutting back on cash and converting money into a digital shekel. Digital cryptocurrency is already a reality, but unlike global currencies like Bitcoin sold by private companies, this digital shekel would be distributed by Israeli banks directly from the country's finance ministry, just like cash is today. The digital cash would potentially come in the form of codes which you would use to pay for goods and services, made as cellular payments. Now, there are obviously a few kinks to work out in the system, such as figuring out how your digital wallet would work and, of course, cybersecurity. That's why this plan is at least another year or two away, but the government believes cybercash could save the country literally billions of dollars, since cash is typically how the tax evaders get away without paying their taxes. Nearly a quarter of Israel's economy actually operates in this black economy gray zone of cash. So even though it's convenient, we may be saying bye-bye to bills in the not-too-distant future.
United States will remember this day in which it was singled out for attack in the General Assembly for the very act of exercising our right as a sovereign nation. We will remember it when we are called upon to once again make the world's largest contribution to the United Nations.
Meanwhile, hundreds of Palestinians have been arrested in the occupied territory since the U.S. recognized Jerusalem al-Quds as Israel's capital. The Palestinian Prisoners Society says Israeli forces have detained more than 600 people since December the 6th. It added that the figure includes 170 minors and 12 women. According to the organization, at least 24 Palestinians were arrested during pre-dawn raids across the West Bank on Tuesday. Tensions heightened across the occupied territories after the U.S. President Donald Trump announced his decision on Jerusalem al-Quds.
On December 26th, the Tiger Forces and their allies liberated Aswad Hill, Mazrat Kahira, Ras Al Ain, Kbaybat Abu al Huda, and the abandoned air defense base in southern Idlib from Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, formerly Jabhat al-Nusra, the Syrian branch of al-Qaeda. Some pro-government sources speculate that this advance is part of a large-scale operation to recapture the entire area west of Ghanassia from the militants. On December the 27th, fighting continued in the area, with government troops attempting to further develop momentum. On December the 26th, militants shot down an L-39 warplane of the Syrian Air Force with a man-portable air defense system. The warplane crashed between the villages of Hamdaniya and Haraitan. According to reports, the pilot was captured and executed by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS. The chief of the Russian General Staff, Army General Valery Gerasimov, announced plans to eliminate the remaining members of HTS in 2018. Some members of this terrorist organization operate in de-escalation zones, Gerasimov said in an interview with the Komsomolskaya Pravda Daily. Jabhat al-Nusra fiercely opposes the ceasefire. Therefore, they must be eliminated. He added that a political settlement in the country, including preparations for the upcoming Congress of the Syrian National Dialogue, is among other important tasks for the next year. Israel is surrounded by dangerous enemies and may face a war on several fronts, Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Gadi Eisencourt said during the annual Chief of Staff Award ceremony, honoring outstanding units at the Kiryat military headquarters in Tel Aviv. The IDF is clearly superior to its enemies, but we are aware of the real danger of proliferation on several fronts which are explosive and require us to act judiciously and creatively, to initiate and to dare, Eisencourt said, hinting that his country is preparing for the escalation of the situation in the region.
The leader of Iran's Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, says that the U.S. is the country's principal enemy, but the Iranian nation is prepared to defeat this enemy in all arenas.
همه بدانند ما در این مرحله و در مراحل دیگر دشمنان خودمون را، آمریکای جنایتکار را و همدستان آمریکا را به فضل الهی زمینگیر خواهیم کرد. به اذن الله تعالی در همه عرصه ها آمریکا را ما مأیوس خواهیم کرد.
Ayatollah Khamenei described the U.S. government as ruthless that rules one of the most corrupt and oppressive countries. The leader said that Washington lent full support to terrorist groups operating in the Middle East, including Daesh. He added that the U.S. is backing regional despotic regimes like Saudi Arabia and Israel, despite their atrocities against the peoples of Yemen and Palestine. Further in a speech, the leader slammed the administration of President Donald Trump for using the language of threat against Iran.
ریگان از ترامپ هم قوی‌تر بود هم عاقل‌تر بود. هم علیه ما اقدام کرد. حالا تهدید و هیاهو و او هنرپیشه بود، بازیگریش هم بهتر از این بود. عملاً هم علیه ما اقدام کرد، اون هواپیمای ما رو زدن و این کار کردن. امروز ریگان کجاست؟ جمهوری اسلامی کجاست؟ امروز جمهوری اسلامی چند برابر زمان ریگان پیشرفت کرده، رشد کرده در همه قسمت‌ها.
Ayatollah Khamenei added that since the 1979 Islamic Revolution, the enemies have used all sorts of hostile actions against Iran, but to no avail. The leader cautioned the Iranian nation to be more vigilant to such plots. He said the enemies continue with their hostile measures, including propaganda and a psychological warfare, economic sanctions, as well as a cultural war against Iran.
Two North Koreans sanctioned by the U.S. are key to the country's goal to build an intercontinental ballistic missile. Ri Pyong-chol and Kim Jong-sik were named as leaders of the country's missile program in a Treasury Department announcement. Based on what we know from the announcement and other reports, Ri is a high-ranking party member and reported to be a key official in the country's ICBM development. He's also reportedly the senior deputy director of the party's munitions industry department. Ri is a former Air Force commander and one of Kim Jong-un's top advisors. A man by that name received a military education in Russia, but it's not clear if the two men are one and the same. The Treasury said Kim Jong-sik is a crucial part of North Korea's push to develop ballistic missiles. He's deputy director of the country's military industry department and has worked in aeronautics in the past. The two men make up half of what's been called North Korea's missile quartet. The group's other two members are scientists. Jang Chang-ha heads the country's Academy of National Defense Science, while Jong Il-ho is a lieutenant general in the army, according to 38 North affiliate North Korea Leadership Watch. These individuals join a growing number of North Koreans gaining prominence in the international news. Foreign Minister Ri Yong-ho has been making headlines for his incendiary anti-U.S. statements, while Kim Jong-un's younger sister, Kim Yo-jong, was recently appointed as an alternate member of the country's top decision-making body.
One of President Trump's challenges in 2018 will be to slow down the development of North Korea's nuclear weapons program. Lucas Tomlinson at the Pentagon tonight looks at what the communist regime has accomplished this year.
2017, a record-setting year for North Korea. Leader Kim Jong-un following through on his New Year's Day promise to successfully launch an intercontinental ballistic missile on July 4th while America celebrated its Independence Day, drawing this warning from the president's national security advisor about the possibility of going to war.
I think it's increasing every day, which means that we're in a race, really. We're in a race to be able to solve this problem. He's getting closer and closer, and there's not much time left.
North Korea's ICBM last month flew 2,800 miles into space, its longest and highest to date, flying 10 times higher than the International Space Station. North Korea launched 3 long-range missiles this year, which experts say could hit the United States if a warhead can one day survive re-entry back to Earth. In addition to conducting over 20 ballistic missile tests this year, North Korea detonated its most powerful nuclear test to date on Labor Day weekend, a blast 17 times greater than the atomic bomb the United States dropped on Hiroshima. South Korea predicts the U.S. and North Korea will finally sit down for talks next year. Russian officials recently offered to mediate such talks. Today, the State Department declined the offer, saying it's up to the North to show it is, quote, ready for credible negotiations on denuclearization. A former Bush White House official warned against negotiating too quickly.
So they essentially use those talks to buy time to continue to develop their program. Keep in mind, our ground-based missile defense in California and in Alaska is only about 50% effective, and that 50% is often the tests are highly scripted.
But there are even more threats from North Korea, according to experts.
We have to remember the North Koreans have potentially as much as 5,000 tons of chemical weapons. We're pretty sure they have a biological weapons program.
A new report from South Korea says the North Korean soldier who defected earlier this year had antibodies in his bloodstream, suggesting past exposure to anthrax, a biological weapon. Kim Jong-un delivers his New Year's address Monday. All eyes will be on what he predicts next. So far, they all appear to be coming true. Mike?
Lucas Tomlinson at the Pentagon tonight. Lucas,
the Foreign Minister has had a frank exchange with his American counterpart over Washington's approach towards North Korea. The two spoke by phone, with the details later released by the Russian Foreign Ministry.
Sergei Lavrov pointed out once again that heightening tensions over the Korean peninsula through Washington's aggressive rhetoric towards Pyongyang and stepping up military preparations in the region is unacceptable.
The phone call took place around the same time the U.S. sanctioned two top North Korean officials who were allegedly involved in the country's ballistic missile program. But in the phone call, Foreign Minister Lavrov mentioned the U.S. stepping up its military preparations in the region, and he was likely referring to recent military exercises. And even South Korea has suggested postponing military drills until after the Olympics, but this proposal was swiftly rejected by Secretary Tillerson.
It is possible for South Korea and the U.S. to review the possibility of postponing the exercises. I have made such a suggestion to the U.S., and the U.S. is currently reviewing it.
These exercises have been ongoing for many years. I'm not aware of any plans to change what is scheduled.
Fiery rhetoric between Washington and Pyongyang has kept the international community on its toes for quite some time now. But let's take a quick look at a recap.
The era of strategic patience with the North Korean regime has failed.
The United States is prepared to use the full range of our capabilities to defend ourselves and our allies.
Our respected leader, Kim Jong-un, said that the U.S. would be unhappy to witness North Korea's strategic power on its Independence Day and called for frequently sending big and small gift packages.
They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen.
The forthcoming measures to be taken by the DPRK will cause the U.S. the greatest pain and suffering it has ever gone through in its entire history.
But if it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea.
We will control the mentally deranged U.S. dotard with fire.
Little rocket man, rocket fuel for the American economy. He is a sick puppy.
Russia has repeatedly offered to mediate the situation, but we've been hearing mixed messages from the Trump administration. So it's unclear whether this phone call will make any difference whatsoever, but it definitely seems like quite the positive direction.
The United Nations Security Council, December 22nd, voted unanimously to impose fresh sanctions on North Korea. The U.S.-led move seeks to get Pyongyang to negotiate on giving up its nuclear and missile programs. North Korea has slammed the measure as an act of war. China has called for greater efforts at negotiations, as outlined in the Security Council's measure.
This resolution has appropriately strengthened sanctions on North Korea. It emphasizes that it should not have detrimental humanitarian impact on ordinary North Korean people and should not affect normal economic exchanges and cooperation, food aid, and humanitarian aid. We call on all countries to exercise restraint and make proactive and constructive efforts to ease the tensions on the peninsula and appropriately resolve the issue.
The sanctions ban almost 90% of oil product exports into North Korea, with a cap at 500,000 barrels. Experts believe such sanctions would take time to work and could target ordinary North Koreans.
The sanctions are a long-term tool. They're meant to increase the amount of money that's hypothetically going into the North Korean coffers, which then funds the missile tests. But the fact is these tests have been, I'm sure they've set aside funding for these long ago. And so there's a desire, I think, to kind of stop the testing and to slow it down. And the sanctions will hurt North Korea in the long term, and the domestic economy, ultimately, I think, is where they'll feel the pain.
South Korean President Moon Jae-in has suggested that Washington and Seoul postpone annual large-scale military exercises this spring to create an atmosphere of peace for the upcoming Olympics. Tension has been high on the Korean Peninsula following North Korea's most recent nuclear and missile tests, as well as several U.S.-South Korea drills.
The Winter Olympics in South Korea begin February 9th. Still, we don't know if North Korean athletes will participate or if the U.S. will delay joint military drills, which together would significantly reduce tensions here. But after an eventful 2017, we may learn more from Pyongyang's leadership, with a widely anticipated New Year's address from Kim Jong-un just days away. Frank Smith, Press TV, Seoul.
My fellow Americans, Melania and I are delighted to wish America and the entire world a very Merry Christmas.
At this time of year, we see the best of America and the soul of the American people. We see children packing boxes to brighten the Christmases of our brave men and women in uniform. We see families reaching out to neighbors in need. And we see communities coming together to serve one another.
In the season of joy, we spend time with our families, We renew the bonds of love and goodwill between our citizens. And most importantly, we celebrate the miracle of Christmas. For Christians, we remember the story of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph that began more than 2,000 years ago. As the book of Isaiah tells us, "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace." This good news is the greatest Christmas gift of all, the reason for our joy and the true source of our hope.
This Christmas season, we celebrate our blessings as Americans, and we pray for peace all over the world.
On behalf of Melania, myself, Barron, and the entire Trump family, God bless you, God bless America, and have a very, very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.